The initial sort of like Web 2, Web 3 kind of thing was all essentially VC scams. And, it was essentially A16Z and company trying to own the next version of the web. So it was not really decentralized. It just had new owners. And Bitcoin happened, right? About over a decade ago now. And Bitcoin is freedom money, right? And you can't really do anything without freedom money. You can't even build a decentralized like internet or communication without freedom money, because otherwise you can't really do anything, even pay for the servers. So what Nostr, Will, and Fiat Jeff did, what was it, about 2 years ago now, Will, when it came out, is they created this incredibly simple protocol that is very good at relaying information and being sort of like is like distributed, decentralized, and it can also be private. It lives in all spaces. It's incredibly hard to kill. It sort of like resolves this problem. So you can have decentralized money and decentralized communication so that humans can sort of trade in peace, right? There is no owners, there's no company. Same for Bitcoin, same for Nostr. There's two sort of, that's at least how I see it. The combination of the two really sort of like had the stars aligned for us to build a more free future for everybody.
So, Will, you along with Fiat Jeff, as NVK mentioned there, are one of the protocol developers. What was your motivation for doing this? And then we can discuss a little further exactly what it is we're talking about. But first, I just want to know, what is the vision here?
Yeah, I've always been interested in new and interesting protocols. Bitcoin really caught my eye early on, and I've always been looking at trying to think of the ways of getting back to like the early days of the internet when everyone it wasn't like owned by corporations and people just hung out and had fun. And it was much more decentralized back then because it was much more a focus on protocols. So I've always been interested in like how do you apply protocols like to improve freedom on the internet. The first one that I tried was Mastodon, and Mastodon was like this really cool idea where you could spin up an instance and then join it and then hang out with your friends. But that we started to see that there's a lot of cracks in that design, in the sense that any one of those instance admins becomes like their own little they can just ban you and then you have to start over. So I was always looking out for a way to like make this kind of solve that issue where that we have on Mastodon. And then I eventually found Nostr, and it got me really intrigued. It was really simple, and I just kind of dived in, and it's been amazing since then. So
there was a kind of exodus after Elon took over. That seemed to be the big alternative, and some recent articles have shown a bit of a drop off in recent months. I would like to hear from you, Will, and maybe NVK, what it is that differentiates Nostr from something like Mastodon.
There's a huge flaw in the sense that you join an instance. So I think NVK ran Bitcoin Hackers, and it was like the only instance that I was able to get on, and without, because I signed up to like multiple different instances, and I would just say the word Bitcoin, and there's just so many communists on these platforms. I just instantly get kicked off, and I get banned. So I have to start over and build my follower list again. So I'm like, I found a home at Bitcoin Hackers, but then the issue was, every other instance just banned Bitcoin Hackers. So it was really just, we only had our small community.
We opened bitcoinhackers.org just in case Twitter sort of started kicking out Bitcoiners. This was a while back. I can't remember what was the reason, but there was something that was going on. I think a lot of Bitcoiners were getting shadow banned on Twitter because Twitter was being run by commies, right? And so we all started joining Mastodon. I'm like, okay, maybe this instance is like how we finally sort of like get enough people, a critical mass outside of Twitter, as at least a backup. My instance had no moderation, right? I'm like, listen, you guys are all adults. Please don't do criminal things. Talk about whatever you want. That caused the whole Mastodon universe to just block my instance. So essentially every single Mastodon server out there blocked it. And we had no communication with the outside Fediverse space. And then I realized oh, wait, there's also people joining my instance who I actually really dislike, and I don't want to host their data. So I went and I deleted one of them. And I was like, okay, great. I don't want to be benevolent dictator either, right? This is not a role I want. I don't want to host your data. When I learned about Nostr, it was a little bit too early. And these guys were playing that. I was too busy with Bitcoin. And then I think it came back a few months ago. I was like, okay, holy crap. This thing is really sort of now the clients work. Will's Damos client was like, this is great.
I was pulling up this Snowden tweet. Snowden is, I would say, probably one of, if not the highest profile user of Nostr at this point. Maybe Jack Dorsey. But he describes this difference between a platform and a protocol, and everyone involved with Nostr is very, insistent that this is a protocol, not a platform. He says if a platform is a silo, a protocol is a river. No one owns it, and everyone is free to swim. Is that an accurate characterization?
I think he really hits the nail on the head in that sense. Platforms, they control the data. They define who's allowed to access the data at what time. And if you get kicked out, then you can't, it's a silo and you can't get to it. But in this case, it's more of like a river where anyone can kind of jump in the river, swim down it. Everyone can kind of be involved. So I really like that analogy. But yeah, it's definitely more of a protocol than a platform. So.
Can I ask real quick, just to follow up with the metaphor of the river? And I'm thinking now of the lazy river at an amusement park. Everybody's kind of floating along in their inner tubes. How does Nostr work as a protocol to make sure that things, there aren't too many people, clogging everything up, etc.?
And yeah, so this is actually a big issue. Because I run probably one of the biggest relays, the Damas relay, and it's wide open to the public, and it's just getting spammed to hell. So it's that's the analogy. There's everyone's kind of clogged and crammed in, and you look at the global feed, it's just spam. So that's a big issue, and one way you can get around this is paid relays. So there's a bunch of paid relays where you just have 10,000 Satoshi entry fee, and only people with those keys can actually post on the relay. So that's one way to kind of clear up the congestion. The web is a great platform, and I don't know, we're kind of abusing terms here, but it's a great platform, and people started to build silos on top of this landscape, which is the web. So the web is decentralized. Anyone can spin up a server, but the main issue is that how do these silos talk to each other, right? So if you set up Gmail or YouTube or all these different platforms, they're all independent. So yeah, in theory, the underlying substrate's decentralized, but the things we're building in this landscape are not, and they don't talk to each other. So when I think of decentralization, or at least the re-decentralization of the web, I see how do we connect these silos together, and how do we make all these apps that we're building interoperable? So I think Nostr is one of these protocols that can actually link these disparate silos together, which is pretty fascinating.
I mean, the client is kind of like Outlook used to be, or something. It allows you to pull your email into some kind of form that you can organize, etc.
I do like the email analogy though, in that
because email is a protocol, right?
Yeah, so email is a protocol. So the main difference is, so it's a really good analogy because you can have multiple different clients. So there's a Gmail client, there's Outlook client, things like that. So Damas would be one client. But the difference between email and Nostr is that, in some sense, the information is siloed within. It's kind of hard to pull down your data and push it to another email server. That's kind of the main difference, is that the data is much more flexible, can flow much better. But it's very similar analogy, I think.
Part of voluntary association is that people can shut down, they can choose not to associate with certain people.
Yeah, I mean,
or
just
to build
block
walls.
the relay.
Yeah,
just get off the relay, or don't block people on your own personal client. You just can't prevent them from talking.